be clear about ISIL. They have rampaged across cities and villages, killing innocent, unarmed civilians in cowardly acts of violence. They abduct women and children and subject them to torture and rape and slavery. They have murdered Muslims, both Sunni and Shia, by the thousands. They target Christians and religious minorities, driving them from their homes, murdering them when they can, for no other reason than they practice a different religion. They declare their ambition to commit genocide against an ancient people. So ISIL speaks for no religion. Their victims are overwhelmingly Muslim, and no faith teaches people to massacre innocents.
New lines have been crossed in the fight against global terrorism, and we are smack dab at the core. American special forces have entered Syria in a rescue attempt. The Department of Defense is talking, and they have told their plans to everybody, including the terrorists. An American is beheaded. Others may follow. Another crossroads reached. There needs to be logical thought and a serious plan. What are we prepared to do? And is the president willing to forego another tea time to lead? Let us lay out these strategic facts. Welcome back to MidPoint, Senior Fellow at the London Center for Policy Research, formerly a proud member of the United States Army, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. Lieutenant Colonel, thanks for being here once again.
Thank you for having me. Sorry I can't be on the air with you, but good to be on with you.
No worries. I know you're in transit a little bit late. That's why we need to catch you here. But let's go ahead and start out. First of all, the Defense Department, the administration announcing the rescue plan for James Foley and the other hostages.
Right.
There seems to be there's two sides here. One side that says, how could they have even given the terrorists a chance to know what they're doing? The other side says, come on, the terrorists have to know sooner or later what's going on, and this is nothing new to them. You've been on the inside. What's the take?
Two things. Well, first off, we've been talking amongst ourselves, and I think we've even talked about this on the air about the fact that we're going to have to go into Syria. So militarily, this was the next logical step. It was an issue of policy. Now, let me be clear on what I'm hearing, and your audience can judge for themselves. One of the reasons the raid failed is because President Obama vacillated on the idea of expanding our military effort into Syria, and I do understand that. But when you vacillate, you take the chance of the intelligence going stale, and when intelligence goes stale, you act on it. They may not be there, and that's what I'm hearing happen here. Now, this is a twofer for Special Operations Command, the folks who had to conduct this operation, and it's not a good twofer. The other factor is that this information was then leaked, and it wasn't leaked by them. This has been pointed out a couple times now. The Pentagon did not, the guys who did this didn't really want to telegraph the fact that we've been starting to move into this area. It's one thing for someone like me to speculate, another thing entirely for it to be admitted as a matter of policy. So that's where we're at. And frankly, what we're seeing here is a need to both define, as you point out, Ed, what are we going to do? You always have to start with the end in mind. What is our ultimate objective? And then you start backward planning is what we call it. And as much as I think President Obama's words were good, he basically nullified everything he said by immediately going out to the golf course and hitting that white ball around, because the perception is, as much as he said the right thing, the actions that followed his words just didn't seem to cut it.
Let's go ahead and then talk about the actual release itself, the beheading, everything that's involved in here. We understand that there were previous captives that ISIS had that were released, debriefed, and that was, again, we are told, and I believe part of what the intelligence was that was based on going in and trying to create this rescue mission here. Am I right so far?
Yes, absolutely. Yes,
okay.
Absolutely. And yes, keep going. Sorry. Yes.
So let's take all that now. Does this now lead us two ways? One, to tell us, first of all, ISIS is not going to be releasing anybody. They'll just execute people from now on because they don't want any intelligence falling into the hands of Americans. Let's deal with that one first.
Well, there's two things that work here, and this is good for the audience to understand, Ed. The ISIS folks have been taking international prisoners, if you will, for a while. As a matter of fact, there's a very delicate situation now ongoing with Turkey. Turkey actually has been experiencing this sort of thing, and basically there's some Turks which are now being held by ISIS as well, which may well expand the effort into Turkey. Turkey wants to deal with it on its own. They don't like it being talked about publicly, but it's something we have to, basically address eventually. So what you see here is ISIS essentially understanding how to use media to great effect. The way they did the unfortunate beheading of Mr. Foley shows that. And by the way, I think it's been recognized this individual, the beadle, the so-called beadle who did the actual act, is probably British. He was probably civilized at some point in time, but it talks to the fact that there's a radicalization effort that's being very effective now ongoing. And so when you combine this radicalization with people showing up to fight, what these hostages are now showing, they have all the makings of being very effective in doing what they do best, being a terrorist organization. Oh. And I do believe these folks are the antichrist of all terrorist organizations, and they're being very effective in their message.
So what we've just talked about, what you have just told us, and second point in this, you mentioned earlier that the president vacillated in some of the intelligence here. Is there any discussion in the intelligence community today that had the president acted immediately upon receiving certain intelligence that they would have found hostages and that would have very potentially, very possibly have been a successful operation?
Ed, there's all sorts of off-ramps the president should have taken over the past year. This is but one new one. Yes, the absolute answer is yes. We have, and let me say the shout-out for him, we have the best, most effective special operations troops in the world. These guys can do amazing things, but you got to give them the green light. You got to say go do it, and you got to do it when the time is right regarding the intelligence. Unfortunately, because there's been this reluctance to expand our effort, to do what's necessary at the time we see it happening, yes, this was another missed opportunity. This isn't as bad as Desert One under Carter, but Ed, it's close by the fact that the whole story, the whole narrative right now could have been a good news narrative, and because we have had such weak leadership on this, opportunity after opportunity based on intelligence, good intelligence, has been wasted. And frankly, I'm hoping the White House wakes up here to basically start anticipating, basically trying to understand that the intelligence needs to be acted on immediately. Sitting on it for 30 days does not help anybody.
Tony, you bring up a good point here, and I just thought about this because as we're talking about an administration that did not act on certain intelligence information that we have. I remember after the days of 9/11, we talked about the fact, and many critics said that at the time, President Bill Clinton did not act fast enough on certain amounts of intelligence that he had, which may have helped us stop 9/11 in its tracks, might have helped us get to Osama bin Laden early. Let's compare the two then. Is this comparable? Is this, when you look at what, in your opinion and the opinion of the intelligence community, when they look at what President Barack Obama has done, is it worse than what Bill Clinton missed? Are we looking at any sort of a correlation?
We're looking at the same pattern. And let me be clear, for your audience to understand, they can Google this. I've actually testified before Congress on the intelligence matters of 9/11. That's what I gave up my intelligence career over. We missed certain clues, but not because, Ed, the intelligence wasn't there pre-9/11. It's because we ignored them. I'd say the bombings in Africa of Tanzania and in Kenya were big clues that they were coming. We ignored those. And then there's other folks, much like President Obama, wanted to do this as a law enforcement issue. The Eric Holder assignment to go after ISIS is kind of like assigning Mickey Mouse to go after Al Capone. I'm sorry. It's totally ridiculous. And the pattern we saw before 9/11 with this kind of, we just want to deal with this as a law enforcement issue, is the same narrative that got us in trouble. The Jamie Gorelick memo, which required us in the intelligence community to not share intelligence with law enforcement for purposes of defeating terrorists. So I see the same thing developing here. This kind of, hey, let's just send lawyers in to take care of this. And lawyers aren't going to stop this. We've got to accept this as a military proposition with military objectives that we must do to stabilize the region. This goes beyond the Iraqi government. Whatever the Iraqi government does or does not do is completely independent of us going after ISIS. So, yes, the answer is yes to your question. We are seeing the same patterns. I'm saying this as a professional. I'm seeing the same patterns of neglect and mismatch of capacity pre-9/11 to what's going on right now.
10 seconds. Real quick question here. Are we looking at once in Syria and we need to go back again?
We need to immediately and repeatedly. Absolutely.
And that's going to have to, unfortunately, end our time together here. Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, always a pleasure, my friend. We'll be in touch. We'll talk to you again real soon.
Thanks, Ed.
All right, take care. Honest facts here and some honest speaking from someone who's been there before. Later this hour, for those who believe the GOP is already as conservative as it needs to be in order to win this fall and beyond, we have a very different take on what their future needs to be. And after the break, have Democrats unleashed a fury in a man determined to prove his innocence and willing to use anything in his power to hold his ground? That's coming up right here on MidPoint, where every day we question everything.